Alrighty, folks. So we're back. Well, folks, we're back with another Hearthstone AMA with game developer Iksar, answering all your latest Hearthstone questions. In this one, we're going to talk a little bit about mercenaries, not too much, but also the possibilities of an auction house in Hearthstone where you could like sell and trade your cards. Pretty crazy. Panda expansion, a few things about wild balance, and maybe some upcoming balance changes. So quite a few things to get through. That said, let's jump into it. All right, so up first here we have probably the biggest topic, so we'll get to it first. What do you think about an auction house in Hearthstone? Pretty crazy idea here, being able to like buy and sell Hearthstone cards essentially, and create some sort of economy within Hearthstone. It's pretty crazy, big, fun, awesome idea. I mean, you've seen that in like Artifact and Diablo 3 even comes to mind in the Blizzard world. And shockingly to me, Iksar says, been really thinking about this. It's massively complex, possibly economy breaking, but the upsides to having player trading of some kind are really high. No plans currently, but has been on my mind. I actually think it's just impressive that that's even been a consideration at all. It just seems so enormous and far beyond the pale for what we normally get for Hearthstone. But yeah, cool, crazy ideas like this being considered is good for the game. I actually don't know if an auction house would be good for the game. Of course, it depends on what it looks like. But just a pretty nutty idea. And nice little mock-up here from Michael. I like putting in the work on your AMA questions. Hey, speaking of Diablo, here's a question about having Diablo showing up in the Mercenaries reveal stream as a big surprise. And the question is, how likely would it be to see a full Prime Evil expansion based on that intellectual property? In other words, Diablo showing up in Hearthstone beyond just a single card, but maybe an entire set. Iksar says, personally, I love it. Team has varying opinions. I wonder if it could be a cosmetic thing. Say we release a mini set, but also offer an alternate art Diablo themed version of that mini set as well, based on how the Diablo and MERCS stuff went, considering doing this more often. So a couple really intriguing things to break down here. Number one, seems like there's some people who are in favor of this. I personally wouldn't love it. I like just playing in the Warcraft lore universe. If we were going to mix other stuff in, as long as it stayed medieval fantasy, I think I'd like that more than, say, like Overwatch and like high-tech characters popping into the Hearthstone world. That would make me more uneasy. Ultimately, if people really enjoyed it and loved it, whatever, doesn't really matter what I think. Intriguing, perhaps more so, is this final sentence. Based on how the Diablo and MERCS stuff went, considering doing this more often. That's a major implication that the Diablo and Mercenaries stuff went well. They were encouraged by the results of how Diablo was received in Mercenaries. Now, I don't know if that means just like qualitatively, like people were hyped on Twitter, or if that means quantitatively, people were actually pre-ordering the Diablo expansion. Iksar's a guy who definitely cares about numbers and metrics, so I sort of think it almost might be that it was pre-ordered to a high rate. They were happy with the results. Don't know that, obviously, and that really surprises me. I mean, what we saw from the community response, it was visible across, Twitch and YouTube and Reddit and Twitter, all the kind of normal haunts for the really engaged Hearthstone community was on average really negative. People were saying way too expensive and didn't seem to be pre-ordering. Now, obviously, that's not, the totality of Hearthstone players. There's a ton of them who never make it to any social media. But also, those people were probably less likely to be paying attention to the reveal or understanding what Mercenaries was. So what does all that mean? Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll get Diablo mini sets or cosmetics in regular Hearthstone, and maybe it means Mercenaries was better received than we thought or realized, perhaps, which in some ways is good, in other ways is concerning if crazy expensive pre-orders are rewarded that quickly at the drop of a hat. It doesn't encourage positive change quite as much. So what do you guys think? You want Diablo? And are you surprised people bought the Diablo's Mercenaries stuff, if indeed that's what you think this implies? So here's an interesting question about Mercenaries. Since both MERCS and Standard share currency, it will be possible to play both game modes at the same time. Now, I don't think he means literally at this exact same moment, but, will you be able to play both of them concurrently as your Hearthstone experience? Like, can you keep up with both game modes, or will you run out of gold, essentially? Iksar says Mercs will have its own rewards and quest-like system in addition to what currently exists. There are also Merc-specific rewards for playing mercenaries. So you didn't really give a sort of meaningful qualitative take there about how viable he thinks that is, but gave some good details here, which are that you'll be able to progress in Mercs on its own. Like if you never leave mercenaries, you'll still have your own rewards and system. And in fact, maybe if you play the game a ton, you might be able to double down on rewards, like the normal rewards track and stuff you were already getting, and then additional rewards and quest-like systems inside of mercenaries as well might help you double dip for additional rewards. I think there's actually another response somewhere that says the total amount of rewards will technically be going up, although of course that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be viable for everybody to claim all those rewards. It might demand like 16 hours a day or something of play, and most of us don't really play that much Hearthstone. Question about Battlegrounds. What are your thoughts on the current meta developments in Battlegrounds? Really happy with the Battlegrounds release. Tons of crazy stuff happening. Room for innovation, generally positive feedback. That said, definitely considering balance changes locking down next week. So if you're thinking about Battlegrounds balance changes, sounds like you're not going to have to wait too awful long. I also had quite a bit of fun playing Battlegrounds. Some noteworthy bugs snuck their way in there, and I think some stuff felt a little strong, but all in all, a big update with lots of new cards. I'm okay with some hiccups here and there for what was ultimately a really nice addition to the mode. Even for someone who doesn't play it a ton, still had quite a bit of fun. All right, so a little bit of detail here on Wild. It was teased earlier by Alec Dawson that there are going to be some Wild changes and standard changes, even some buffs, which I'll do a video on, I think tomorrow maybe. Stay tuned. But specifically a question here about Crystallizer empowering Quest Warlock in Wild format, because it just deals so much damage for a 1-drop to your face for the quest activations without actually really damaging you at all, because you gain the armor back. And Iksar says, well, look at all the high win rate suspects. Crystallizer was brought up by Gallon as something high on the list. And that's a card I've seen a lot of Wild people mention as well. So cool that they're considering even kind of out of the box stuff like Crystallizer, and maybe even a hint of a rule change like the call, so that it doesn't support the quest line, but in a lot of ways functionally stays the same, as opposed to like making it only deal 3 damage or something like that. That would be a buff in most cases, but in other ways, of course, a nerf to this particular deck. Cool Arena question here. Are there any current development plans or goals for Arena? Iksar says, I'd like for there to be ranked, and I'd like for there to be matchmaking. And because of matchmaking, I'd like there to be a different reward structure than what currently exists. So it sounds to me kind of like something like Duels rating or Battlegrounds rating coming into Arena and matching people based on skill. That has some implications, because if you did that now, of course, it'd be much, much harder to get regular high win runs, because you'd be playing people of equal skill level, and therefore you wouldn't be getting great rewards. But it can also be better for people who suck at the game mode, because right now, if you go in Arena and you suck, you're never going to get any good rewards. But if you played against other people who sucked, forgive me for saying people suck, but less skilled players, you could still get the occasional high win run and it'd be more rewarding. So that's why he mentions the rewards structure change here. All in all, as long as it's a good direction, I think it'd be really nice to see some changes in Arena. It's a format that seems very left behind for a very long time, despite having some pretty dedicated players. So sounds good to me. All right, so this is interesting. Have you considered making the Juggernaut reward from the Warrior quest line trigger at the end of your turn instead of the beginning, so it has some immediate impact on board, basically getting those pirates and those 2/2 pings right away? Right now, it does feel far too slow. Iksar says, considering buffs this week. Can't comment on what the team is thinking until we have that meeting. So again, some buffs were teased. Sounds like specifically maybe some buffs to Quest Warrior. Now, I was prepping a video for potential buffs, and I didn't include the Warrior quest, specifically because it's being played to some success in Wild format, and I was worried if they buffed Quest in Standard, they'd also be buffing Quest in Wild, and potentially creating an even more problematic deck that already seems to be pretty solid in Wild format. I'm not an expert, I just looked at the data. So intriguing to keep an eye on this one in case it snowballs out of control. I thought about maybe buffing another pirate to kind of help the quest pirate stuff in Standard along, without perhaps buffing Wild format. So something like Cargo Guard, a card that might be run in Standard but not Wild. But sounds like Pirate Warrior might be coming back to Standard. Are we likely to see a panda-themed expansion? There's basically no way we'll not do a Pandaria expansion. Excited to hear that. I love pandas. The team is just split on whether we should do it now or wait until we possibly release Monk someday, which is not currently in development. I'm personally on team, let's just do it, but I'm not the only opinion in the room. So a couple things there. No Monk currently on the table. They have talked about potentially doing more new classes. Sounds like Monk is still the bottom of that list, as was teased previously. We might get a panda expansion anyway, though. I would love that. I'm a big fan of the pandas. All right, so finally, as is tradition, I'm going to save the thing I have the most to say about till the end here. Question here about current meta seems to have a lot of polarized 65 to 80% win rate matchups among competitive decks than I've ever remembered in recent memory. Is this something you or the team find concerning? Iksar says there are rarely ever any 65+% win rate matchups between any meta decks. In comparison to past metas, this one is statistically less polarized than most. So, okay, I mean, obviously we don't have insights to behind the scenes data, but I was curious. So I checked out HS Replay's data. For instance, I just went United and Stormwind, Diamond through Legend. So basically the last like 30 days, Diamond through Legend. Currently, like Quest Shaman, let's take a look, right? Top deck. Been played 1.1 million times. And I started looking through, you know, I said, let's make sure that they're playing against actual meta decks that are popular. So maybe, you know, you look at stuff like 10,000 or more games to make sure you're not getting like weird stuff that nobody plays. According to HS Replay, at least, you know, at higher ranks, this time filter, whatever, there's quite a few that are 65% plus. There's Death Rattle Demon Hunter, 69%. Fell Rattle Demon Hunter, 73%. Here's Quest Demon Hunter, 65%. 70% for Aggro Druid, 73%. This one's not quite 65%, so that's in range. 70s all across the board here for Priest. Paladin's looking a little closer to middle range. Quest Mage, 30%. That's actually 65% for the Quest Mage. Miracle Rogue, 65%. Aggro Elemental is, I don't know. Quest Warlock, 28%. So, I mean, of all the decks with 10,000 or more games, which is an arbitrary filter, of course, but regardless, it seems like there's quite a few matchups that have what is visible to us, at least, as a higher than 67% polarization or 65% polarization. So, you know, I didn't look at every deck, by the way. If you want to look at like Quest Warlock real quick, we could do the same. I just pulled up Quest Shaman first, right? This might be better, so maybe, you know, we had a really bad sample. Here's a 68, 68. These are in range. Here's some 70s, but not quite at our threshold. So, I mean, this looks a little better, right? Quest Warlock seems to have less polarized stuff. Here's Quest Mage kind of in range. Quest Shaman, we saw the other side of that. So, yeah, I mean, this one definitely does look a little more middle tier. So maybe it's just Quest Shaman specifically that has the most polarization. So, okay, this is a more fair picture. Maybe if we look across more decks. I still probably wouldn't describe that as rarely ever, but you know, again, we don't see the whole data set. So anyway, it feels like there's a lot of polarization to me. I think a lot of people feel that polarization where some matchups just feel totally unwinnable. So even if the data doesn't tell the whole story, sometimes feelings capture a fair bit as well. Although the data we have does kind of seem to tell that story as well, at the very least, for certain matchups, for sure. Because remember, every matchup we looked at for Quest Shaman, right, there's another deck on the other side of that that's a meta deck as well. So all in all, just a thought. Do you guys think Hearthstone feels too polarized? Does it feel more or less polarized than before? I certainly don't have data for old expansions, so this may actually be less polarized for all I know. So anyway, I think that wraps it up for our AMA this time around. As always, big shout out to Iksar for venturing into the craziness of Twitter and risking life and limb, sometimes dealing with community questions. He gets a lot of hate on these, so even if you don't like the answers always, I think you have to appreciate at the very least the effort and you know, putting your neck out on the line basically sometimes with what you have to say publicly. So share your thoughts. As always, curious to hear what you guys have to say. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.